Our South African National Defence Force Union Secretary, Pikkie Greeff, joins us for his reaction. Pikkie, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Is this the best option to fight the criminality that is illegal mining in the country?
Yeah, I think we should firstly just acknowledge that we should never normalize the deployment of the SANDF in, civilian circumstances. But having said that, I do, however, think that as far as illegal mining is concerned and the nature of the threat that these zamas pose, having shown in the past that they are not unwilling to engage in gun battles with the authorities, I do think that in this case perhaps a military solution is a good one.
What kind of infantry are we talking about here that will be on the ground? What nature of equipment? What kind of training do they have?
Yeah, look, I think we're talking about light infantry, which means, armored personnel carriers, and then obviously foot soldiers armed with automatic rifles and so on, and dispatched to wherever they are needed, and the ability to be rapidly deployed. That's the kind of force we live. And yes, they are certainly trained for this scenario, because if you have groups of, let's call them militia, because that's really what the zamas are since they armed themselves, then obviously the Defence Force is the appropriate mechanism to meet their threat.
So the police's special force unit would not be able to, I suppose, be able to handle the kind of invasion that would need to happen here?
No, the task force of the police is not designed for that kind of thing. They more engage in things like, hostage situations and the like. This is more where you're encountering groups of people who are armed. They've shown themselves to be willing to engage in skirmishes. And, I think the training is more appropriate from the SANDF side than from the SAP side.
Yeah. Training is one thing. I suppose the armory is one thing. But when the defense minister was asked in Parliament just the other day, she says that, well, we are standing by, ready to be called when the president makes the call. Do they have a plan, one? And will the plan work, two?
Well, look, the Defence Force will never deploy without a, deployment plan. Those things are very carefully planned, and they will never make a plan that they're not capable of meeting. So, I think that's very important for the public to take notice of. We have a very effective Defence Force, and these soldiers are ready, and they will certainly be up to the task.
Intelligence-wise, how is the operation going to be carried out? I mean, are we going to be using South African Police Service intelligence? Are we going to be using Army intelligence, military intelligence?
I think a combination of all of them. The Defence Force does have intelligence capability, and certainly they will use that. But those intelligence services that you mentioned, they are always coordinated, and especially in operations like these, all of those sources will be used.
Yeah. One of the conversations you and I have had previously, of course, was around budgets and how this is eating off on our capacity. One of the capabilities that it seems is going to be required here is aerial capability. With the expenditure of R500 billion going into this for the next 6 months, will we be able to have enough equipment as far as that is concerned to carry out those kind of operations?
Well, we hope so. To call on an operation and not have the proper equipment or means, that, of course, that makes it farcical. But I don't think this is a situation. I'm quite sure that the authorities are going to make sure that we have an aerial capability, at least for this operation. And, I don't think there's going to be any problems in that regard.
So what are we talking about here? I mean, you're saying the army is able to hold fort. What is holding fort? What does it actually mean?
Well, the example that I used, because you're referring to a previous interview that I had,
yes.
The example that I used was, let's say, for instance, the Defence Force is dispatched to a certain area, mining, where illegal activities are, and there's some people who are rather combative and are willing to engage in firefights, then obviously, the Defence Force will engage them for lack of a better term, take over that mining area and then guard it. so that those people do not return, or that some of their associates don't return, and stand their ground on that area.
And what would be required here in terms of command structures for this to be effective? I mean, I'm assuming that, of course, illegal mining remains a criminal issue, which means there is some degree of policing that will be involved. So in terms of command structures, there will be some high-ranking police officer there that would be able to give instructions to the military, and then whoever is the highest ranking in the military would be able to then give instruction to those who are deployed.
Absolutely. Look, this deployment is not the SANDF on its own. It's, as you mentioned in the introduction, it's under auspices of, under supervision of the police and in support of the police. But obviously the police, will also know the operational plan from the Defence Forces side. And so, the line of command will simply be that the police calls the shots, and the SANDF will react to that as long as it is in accordance with their operational plan. And so those structures are in place, and they will be in place. I'm quite sure that we're going to see a lot of success.
Now, I'm sure you have seen some kind of reaction to this, including some who have said deploying, as you've mentioned earlier on, the army to deal with criminality, policing issues, not necessarily the thing that you want to see happening, because this will certainly have some kind of impact on the civil-military relations. What do you think will be the end result of this deployment?
Yeah, I think, the end result will be that we'll probably gain some successes against these criminal gangs that run these illegal mining operations. But I'm also, on the other side, it's two sides of a coin. I'm a bit afraid that society in South Africa will start depending on the military solely for solving criminal issues. And I really think that's something that people should take into account, is that, the fact is things have gotten so out of hand that we now need the military in certain circumstances to control crime. And that's a really worrying phenomena.
Yeah. What would be required, to minimize that impact? Already we are seeing, for example, in the deployment of the military during the COVID pandemic, that it had some kind of adverse effect in how society viewed the military, ending up taking some to court and so on and so forth. How do we minimize that kind of tension?
Well, I think obviously we have to call on our soldiers to behave in a professional way at all times. That's number one. And secondly, I think the Defence Force needs to take a very strong stand against members who misbehave during deployments, especially towards members of society. I think they're with the public about those kinds of things and what the stances the Department of Defence has on it. They're way too silent, in my opinion. And, I think that's one of the ways of minimizing it. But, discipline and morale is everything in the Defence Force, and as long as you have a disciplined force, then society will realize that.
Pikkie, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. South African National Defence Force Union Secretary there, Pikkie Greeff.